Okay, I'm on mute.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Mr. Livingston.
Hello, how's everybody doing?
Doing well, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Jackson.
Let's see Mr. Jackson there, okay.
He's muted.
Good afternoon, Ms. Roberts. Good afternoon, Ms. Livingston.
How's it going there, Mr. Jackson?
Doing fine, sir.
Same here, same here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Manning.
Good afternoon.
Hello there, Mr. Manning.
Trust everybody and their family are doing well.
Very much so. Please count the blessings. How about you and your family, Mr. Manning? Y'all hanging in there? Hello, Ms. McBride, how you doing there?
Thank you.
Miss Dickerson's here.
Hello, Ms. Dickerson.
I'm not zooming in on, so you can't see me today.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
This is Shaquise Newton. I'm with Miss Dickerson. I couldn't Zoom today.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Who do we have on the line so far from staff?
Okay, we have Director Maloney. We have County Engineer Daly.
John Thompson.
Oh, we got quite an echo.
What it is, we gotta get off that Zoom session. Do me a favor, put it back up first.
Good afternoon, Chairman Livingston. This is Ashley, and I'm on as well.
Thank you. Okay, it's that time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order for our work session to order on May 4th. And this work session references our comprehensive maintenance plan and efforts. Dr. Thompson, are you going to be taking the lead on this effort, this particular meeting on behalf of staff?
We got an echo.
Dr. Thompson, did you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to staff at this point. So get the meeting started.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
sir.
Yes,
Can you all hear me okay now?
yes. I think a councilman wanted to be recognized. So, Dr. Newton?
It was. I think they may have fixed it. I was just going to suggest that if we continue to hear the echo, that if the non-speakers muted their lines, that would decrease the feedback.
Thank you. Yes. Excuse me. Dr. Thompson?
All right, Mr. Livingston, thank you so much to you and members of County Council. So the purpose of today's work session is to discuss the comprehensive road maintenance program for the county. As you all are aware, we've had numerous conversations about a path forward, about how do we manage the unpaved road versus the paved roads, how do we take in the abandoned roads into the portfolio. And so Mr. Maloney, Director Maloney, will guide us through the comprehensive road maintenance PowerPoint presentation that everyone by now should have a copy of. And again, this conversation is an open-ended conversation. We're going to lay out where we are in terms of the things that the county is currently doing, also identify the gaps. So, for example, being able to discuss a path forward for the unpaved roads. And so we understand with the Penny program, we're not going to be able to pave all the roads. So we'll be able to pave about, I think, 307 of the 590 some roads. And so therein lies an opportunity to address that void in the county maintenance program and moving forward. And so with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Director Maloney to guide us through this presentation. And please feel free at any time to ask us questions so we can hear your thoughts as we put together a comprehensive plan and moving forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you,
this is
Dr.
Shakith
Thompson.
Newton.
Ma'am?
Mr. Chair, am I recognized?
Excuse me, do any of my colleagues have any questions before we get started?
Yes, looking at the agenda, Mr. Maloney, questions that I have that I'm sure you can incorporate as you make your comments. I just figured it would be better to raise them now. As we look at, the path forward and what you propose, it would also be helpful for me to understand what is the process that we're currently using to manage our inventory and roads. So I don't know where that fits into your agenda. I don't know that I necessarily saw it as part of your slides, but I'd appreciate it if you could put that in as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other brief comments before we get started? If not, Ms. Maloney, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Honorable Council. I appreciate the opportunity to present this to you and understand that it's the first presentation of this that since I've taken the director role at the county, and looking at some of the past practices and that we wanted to improve on. Certainly taking in your input on how we can better do that is why we're here, and thank you very much for that, Councilmember Newton. We were asked at the meeting, at a prior meeting, what kind of meetings have we had on this to date? And some of, when you look at the title of going to prior meeting slide, there was a committee meeting and a council work session, an ECT meeting to prepare for a council retreat. That was 2 council retreats ago, and then a admin and finance committee meeting. After that, there was a special council meeting, and then, of course, the April council meeting that we just had in this meeting. You'll see that by title, the subject has evolved from private roads to how we're going to deal with all our roads while taking in the private roads. We get into road project funding, and this is kind of the issue that why did I stop and not really spend a lot of time talking about dirt roads yet? It comes down to the funding side of it, and right now, Public Works is using C funds to help with certain projects. Council had approved some sidewalk projects this winter. There's some upcoming road maintenance projects that are in the budget for 20 and 21. But we want to talk about how we would have to really maximize what's available in these funds just to handle resurfacing existing roads. Okay, and one of our problems with, you know, potholes and road patches that need to be done is that many roads have gone past their useful life and are in a high maintenance situation. So as we go through that, we realize that the C Fund, looking at their June of 2019 report, was getting a little over near $5 million a year, with DOT getting 25% guaranteed and actually utilizing quite a bit more than that each year. There's a limit on what we're going to see, and sharing with Columbia and other needs within the greater Richland County. Road maintenance funds from
Mr. Livingston?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Question, Ms. Myers? Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sorry, Mr. Maloney, did I hear you saying that that you all had decided to focus the county's road maintenance fee funds exclusively on paved roads?
No, ma'am. I'm pointing out if we do, we will just be able to keep up with the pavement maintenance that would be required to maintain the 600 miles we have. So we'd have to be looking at how are we going to do this with other funding sources, et cetera. So that I haven't really gotten to yet, but that does get into this in the presentation, yes.
Okay.
We do have another fund from the vehicle registration tax, and it sounded like it varies a little bit because all our patching and pothole work and crew time and machinery go into this road maintenance fund, okay? So depending on how we manage that whole roads drainage maintenance, particularly take the drainage up, but the road maintenance personnel, equipment, repairs that come up from, you know, potholes and patches, and those types of items right now are getting somewhere between, allowing us to also have somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million in capital projects where we would go out and repave a road or something larger than just fixing potholes. So that there is some opportunity in that within management of the department to try to maximize that fund. And that's kind of getting us into that $4 million a year that I think would be the bare minimum to keep up existing pavements. The challenge again is there's 592 paved roads. Currently, the latest number I got was 213 unpaved roads. So that's a falling number, thanks to the penny that some of these roads have come out and they've gone into paved roads. Paved roads is rising 7 to 8 miles per year from new development, and of course we'll also have to account for the unpaved roads that are getting paved with the penny coming in as well. But then we also had that abandoned roads that added new roads from the subdivisions that defaulted back in the mid 2010, 2008 period. We're suggesting that we got to take all our roads into account at, we'd have a 5-year capital plan so we can focus on what's coming up, but we really need to look at it from a 30-year plan, which is the life cycle of the road. And we're going to have to make the life cycle of a lot of our roads last longer than 30 years. And DOT would tell you they're only going to last 20. But I think we know that a lot of our local roads, the binder course and the bases in those have to last longer than a high volume DOT road. We're going to have to do this so that there's a good plan in place and that council can approve the projects annually each year. And the reason for that is the way it's going right now is we're going to council with projects that you may not have been aware of. And so you're having to come up to speed on a specific project and we're having to get funding for that. At the same time, a lot of other folks are at the table at CTC getting funding and kind of way ahead of us on the budget. So that's something we really need to get approval of a group of projects for the year and proceed. The public also would be better served by being informed of when projects in their community are gonna happen and when. This is something we can do with our webpage and different items to put out. Hey, we've got this neighborhood coming up in this year. These neighborhoods are planned for the next year, and each year council would approve those coming in. We look at the development, the process development of this, and we were beginning with right-of-way acquisition because we realized that acquisition of those missing subdivisions are gonna take a while. One of the residents that spoke at the meeting, or at least sent in their comments before our last council meeting, was in a neighborhood that had just come in after about 4 years of council approval for bringing in that abandoned road. So that was something that could take a while depending on the developer and the situation with whoever owns the land. Then we'd get into where we are, and that's developing the plan elements. What are we gonna be looking at? So I had mentioned, and you saw that, there's a lot on existing pavement and evaluating it. The pavements were last evaluated about 5 years ago. We obviously have new pavements of about eight miles coming in every year since, so about 40 more miles of roads that we have, we would assume to be in the newer condition. But we also would want to then see how these older pavements are handling it, and then evaluate where they should be in a maintenance cycle. Can we do preventative maintenance on that pavement, which is another item we want to get into here that we're not currently doing. Then we would go from getting the understanding of the existing conditions that pavement develop the plan elements to getting into the capital maintenance plan and mapping the projects in a 30-year life cycle, and then a distribution of projects using a fair system that's already implemented within the county ordinance. And then we would look for your approval at the end of that process to execute the plan. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't have working meetings in there. And I think, given some of the questions, I think that it will involve another working session related to unpaved roads. Step one of this system is to ensure that they are in the maintenance system, okay? And that's one of the problems we have with unpaved roads because they aren't county right-of-way. And what the penny's doing is getting easements right now to bring them into the county maintenance system and then putting the money into them. So it is a process there. It would be the same process that was approved a couple of weeks ago for each road group. As they would come in, they would need that right-of-way approval to be able to accept, for us to be able to perform per the ordinances, our road maintenance and certainly capital road maintenance. We would coordinate with the county attorney's office to obtain developer funding. Okay, that sounds easier than it'll be, but that's something we want to have in there to deal with the fact that some developers are still out there developing that were part of the abandoned road. So there's a statement in all that maybe county staff didn't renew their bond that was protecting that developer from their own default. But again, there's nothing in the ordinances that puts that on county staff, and in fact, it actually reads that the developer shall obtain and the bond. So it's really not detailed, but it certainly was on them to also renew their bond when it failed or ran out of time. So that we will work with county attorney's office as we go through and they come in. We'll then go through that and report to you what happened, prepare the legal description, and execute documents for it to come in. Some of the right-of-ways, and we have Stephen Staley, the county engineer here, he said some of these don't need much. Some need what would have normally transpired by not having any road maintenance by us over 10 years. And those are the things where I said, well, when we bring them in, we need to fix safety issues like potholes. But if it was missing a lift of asphalt, that is the thing that we were saying we got to go to the developer that was responsible for that before we bring it in and do our due diligence to provide that to the county at their cost. And then it would be bringing it in with the Register of Deeds. The next slide is step one, continued with the map of the county and the districts and the subdivisions. And there's 18 different subdivisions there that we were talking about. You know, it's a reasonable amount of different people to deal with, but that's where we're gonna go through a list of people that are still developing and kind of look into that. That capital road maintenance issue that we may have been left with in 2008 to 2012. We bring in the right-of-way at that point, that, you know, if we were going after C funds or whatnot, or just doing road maintenance, those are things that are required by our ordinance, and C funds required by CTC for funding. So at some point, when we get to that point, those are requirements to have the right of way. Step two is developing the comprehensive maintenance plan elements. We start with hiring a consultant for evaluation. They have a machine that goes out and rates the roadways to take, I guess what I'd call the human decision-making factor out of what the road paving condition is. And then it comes back with the rating. We also have to establish some ground rules within that, during that process here in-house, as far as, are we good?
I don't know.
It's not gonna work.
No.
Am I, are we, is everybody able to hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, sir. They were just looking at our presentation capability, which we'll just continue without. Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, Mike.
We would have established in-house here what we would be looking at, and with the help of our consultant, you know, when we get to evaluation and it comes in, you know, as a 4 or 5 year old pavement, it's wearing as we would have suspected. When we get to, you know, 6 to 7 years, we would be looking at something called preventative maintenance, steel coating, crack filling, things like that, to try to expand the life of the pavement. And we would be establishing rules for the maintenance item inclusion in the plan. So the other thing I have on the next page is how we prioritize projects. You cannot get sticky pages with beyond. The countywide project distribution for ordinance 2121B. So when we're resurfacing roads, for the resurfacing of existing paved roads, it will be distributed by county council district based on that district's portion of the total paved road mileage. The pro rata or proportion will be distributed as follows. So it is just that. It's the total times the district paved divided by the total mileage. And
Mr. Maloney?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this is Delia Myers. Why did you start with 2121B rather than 2120, which is the road paving program, and then continue through the section you're focusing on? Because the funding comes from everyone in the county, whether they live in an area with 25% unpaved road and 75% paved, or vice versa. And so to the extent that we're skipping the first half of the statute, I don't understand how we get to a fair apportionment on the funding slide. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Stephen, do you understand that?
No, this, I think this is, from what I remember, I think this is the way that the Penny is proceeding with their, program.
But the penny
Okay,
is proceeding pursuant to a referendum. I'm talking about our ordinance, which is the way we collect our money. And 2120 is the road paving program. And then 2121, you're absolutely right. That is the continuation of it. But you've taken out one section and essentially apportioned all the money based on that one section and left out half of the ordinance.
Ms. Myers, we're referring to the unpaved, right?
No, I'm referring to 2120 where it says road paving program. And this deals with all county roads. Because essentially we have 800 miles of county roads, but we're discussing today in the main 600 miles. And so we're by definition leaving out 200 miles, but we're collecting money from all the miles.
Okay, ma'am. I mean, that is exactly the point from before, is that 200 miles of unpaved plus or minus distance there, that we need to add to this.
So you're saying then that your plan is not comprehensive and you're going to come back for approval when it's comprehensive?
As Myers, the purpose is to get input from you all today.
Yeah.
Regarding where the program is, the deficiencies, the voids in the program, and to be able to, again, get your input so that we can make sure this plan is comprehensive and moving forward.
Okay. So I would suggest then looking at section 2120 of our ordinance, which is the beginning of the road paving program, and obviously including 2121 A and B, because all of that is how you get to the formula. So we've left out a portion of it. I would suggest we add that in.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Ms. McBride.
I would like to commend the staff for at least trying to provide an equitable distribution of the funding in using ordinance 2121B, and that remains a very important component. Thank you.
Any,
Okay, Mr. Chair.
you may proceed.
Thank you, sir. Step 2 continued on the chart. I did want to give you an example of how that 2121 would shake out with the current road mileage that we receive by council district. And that was just based on, if we can get to the 4 million, I believe we really need to keep the roads up long-term. And that's kind of barring what, if there was a long-term solution with Penny and that type of thing, but just this is its own being a long-term solution. This is the kind of dollars that would need to be going into your resurfacing every year, year in, year out. Okay, so that was for your purposes there for seeing how that would be going. Step 3 is getting into the capital maintenance plan and the countywide map. This is where I really sat down and said, we have 600 miles of paved road. What's it cost to pave a mile of paved road? Well, about $250,000 a mile. That's $150 million in assets that we have to replace every 30 years. So that's $5 million a year. Right now, I'm only identifying these sources that we have of $4 million a year. So that's where preventative maintenance can really come in to extend pavement life, new operations with the thin mill and overlays, things like that will need to be augmented to make $4 million a year even feasible.
Mr. Chair,
Dickerson.
I at one time I recall a conversation about alternative material for paving. Was that considered for some roads that were less, that had less travel, that we could use alternative materials to lower the cost or to spread some of that cost? Was that something that you all are considering, or you're not?
Yes, ma'am, this is Stephen Staley. That would be part of the pavement preservation, where we could extend the pavement life using thin lifts or some different kind of materials, kind of like asphalt, but they go a lot farther as far as extending the life of the existing pavement. That would be part of the pavement preservation.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so that is a key component, and so I didn't get into the rest of this, but if if we can find additional funding or resources to help with the paving of unpaved roads, certainly that's the next thing we'll be working on, to try to integrate that. But I wanted to show you where we are, just to deal with the roads we currently have paved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can
I think that was
This is Shakith Newton.
Ms. Newton. Ms. Newton, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney, thank you. A few quick questions on the information that you've shared, and I apologize if I've missed it. So first, when you looked at, when you identified the $4 million per year as possible funding, I noted the possible. Can you remind me what the sources were that you were using to generate that?
I was using $1 million. Let's see, we can go back to about the third page. Yeah, fourth.
The vehicle registration tax and the CTC funding?
Yeah, you know, and that this possible part is that, you know, we are challenged with other users on that, but the $3 million from the C fund and about $1 million from the road maintenance fund.
Okay, and so acknowledging the point that you just made on the C funding, that is not funding that is dedicated towards Richland County. That's money that several municipalities can request, and it's a competitive process. So we can't count on that money. Is that correct?
Historically, no. I mean, we haven't put in for the maximum amount either. I would say, you know, when there was a large budget there at the end of last year, I saw that a lot of money went out to DOT on sidewalk projects.
Okay,
And
so looking at, again, and this is me just trying to be really clear. If I was planning my household budget, I want to be clear as well. So looking at the funding that you've identified there, where you're looking at the vehicle registration tax, and then you're looking at the C funds, as opposed to $4 million per year possible, it's more of a range of 500,000 to 4 million possible when you look at all those contingencies. Would that be accurate?
I think to say zero would be, you know, not exactly.
I didn't say zero. I apologize if you couldn't hear me. I'm saying if your slide said $500,000 to 1 million, that's okay. And then this is so you've answered my question, but then the secondary question based on what you've said, and this may be something where you need guidance from council as a policy. What it sounded like you said to me was, we're looking at these sources of funding, and then we'll see if we can identify additional sources of funding so that we can integrate the dirt roads. From my perspective as county council, we have responsibility for all the roads. So as opposed to saying all of this that you found so far is for paved, and we'll see if we can find more for unpaved, I would suggest rather that we look at the entire pot of funds that we have for roads, for both paved and unpaved and divvy that way. But I could have misheard you, and we might be on the same page. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're quite welcome. Does anyone else want to be recognized? You may go ahead, Mr. Maloney.
Okay. So, Stephen, if you could just give a briefing on what we have budgeted for the pavement preservation. I think we have 2 years, and we were to get started on that.
Yeah, council approved us for 500,000 for this year, and we talked about another 500,000 for next year. Part of that we were going to use to do your steps on the evaluation of the pavements after we get those abandoned roads into our system. And that was going to be the start of using some of that money. And then from there, we could decide what roads that we wanted to do pavement preservation on, and have a pretty good chunk of money to make an impact.
Okay. And that again are roads that are not in great disrepair, but are in the middle of life, where we can have impact to preserve that surface course. And that's under slide 3. That slide 3.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Mr. Jackson.
yeah, Stephen, Mr. Maloney, question. You talked about the evaluation of the pavement. It sounds like that's a next step, which is a critical next step, because in order to determine how much all of the roads are going to cost, paved or unpaved, there needs to be an evaluation of all the roads, number one. Number two, it's important to bring all the roads in order to do a fair evaluation of all the roads that are being considered. So my question is, the approval that you've gotten, $500,000, but the question is, how long do you think it will take to conduct an evaluation of the pavement in order to come back with a realistic estimate, a cost of what this is going to cost, whether it's from 0 to 4 million, or 500,000 to 4 million, or 4 million to 8 million? How long will that process of evaluating take to be able to come back with a much more concrete and definitive answer of where we are and where we need to be financially?
Yes, sir. Usually it's about a 3-month process to gather the data. But since we have a lot of the data already from the evaluation was done in 2015, it should be a little bit quicker, maybe 2 months. And we're just talking about paved roads evaluations. It's a pavement evaluation.
Sure.
And
sure.
From there, then we could determine which level, where do we want to start with the, what's the lowest level? We want to start doing some full-blown repairs, and where we want to start with the pavement preservation. And there's guidelines out there from different sources that tell you, how to do that.
Sure. Follow-up question, if we come out of this situation, the pandemic that we're experiencing right now, with not a tremendous decline in what we're hoping to expect to submit in a budget, are you planning to, and you're able to get another 500,000 from the council, that would be close to $1 million. And right now, I think I've only heard you mention about 100,000 of the first 500 being obligated. So am I correct that if you were able to get another 500 for $1 million, about 10% is obligated, and the remaining 90% would not currently be obligated?
It would be, that would be set aside for pavement preservation.
Yes, that's what I want to hear. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Once we decide which roads need that, then we could let a contract and have that done.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Is that Ms. Myers?
Yes, sir. This is Delia.
Please recognize.
So, thank you. Mr. Maloney, thank you. First of all, let me say that you said something a minute ago that I've been asking for 4 years, and you said it so casually. I don't even realize I don't even know if you realize what gold mine it was to some of us. You gave an absolute number for the cost per mile of paving, $250,000 per mile. You said that's the average cost. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That would be for something like a mill and overlay, which is what.
I got it. We've had a hard time getting an average cost for anything, so I appreciate that. I'm grateful that you have that. So thank you for that. Secondly, I want to go back to something that Ms. Newton said, and I really do not want us to be looking at moving forward with a 2-tiered system. I'd like us to be looking at a county road maintenance program, period. And that should take in my opinion, all the roads. And I understand that you're making this distinction because you have to make the distinction in order to figure out what to do for the road. But in making this distinction, what we've now done is to prioritize paved roads above unpaved roads, because we're now even looking at how long it'll take us to get an analysis of the condition of those roads. And we haven't even mentioned that we need an analysis of the condition of all roads. And so I would ask that we move forward with a comprehensive program, and that the word comprehensive be used for just what its ordinary definition is, comprehensive, including all, and not to move forward with a 2-tiered system where all citizens are taxed, but not all of them are benefited by what we do with their tax money. It shouldn't matter the kind of road we should have a plan for it. That may mean that it takes longer. I'm not suggesting the timeline is the same for everything, but I'm suggesting that it ought to all be in the plan from day one. Thank you.
You may go ahead. Any other questions? Ms. Maloney, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, this is Shakith Newton.
I'm sorry, Ms. Newton.
I have a question. And Mr. Maloney, if this is better better placed or asked with some of your subsequent slides, then I'm happy to defer my question. But it's the question that I asked previously, which is, this is helping me to see how you want to map it moving forward. We talked about the $500,000 that's been allocated that's not currently being used. I would still love to, before we leave this work session, have a clear picture of how the maintenance and upkeep of all of our existing inventory of roads is being handled right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. This is Stephen Staley. It's on as far as the dirt road maintenance. We have some roads, dirt roads that are on a regularly scheduled scraping and put rock down, just because of where they're at and the slope and the kind of material. That's mainly for dirt roads, and then we have service requests through the citizens that put us in going to some hot spots on some dirt roads that might have just came about, but that's mainly on the dirt roads. On the paved roads, it's pretty much all, except for what the penny is doing. All our repairs are based on one-stop calls, and I think that's why this comprehensive plan is going to be really good for us going forward. It's never been done before, that I recall.
Yeah.
I've only been there 5 years, but it's pretty much service request based.
Right now, the crews are reacting to a call for a pothole or problem in a road, and then they get to that neighborhood and they find there's really, 10 more problems with the road, and so they spend some time in neighborhoods. But yeah, there isn't a plan to, travel around through the neighborhoods, in a certain way. As you know, potholes are a random failure that needs to be addressed. But as far as road inspections and that's why we're starting with this, and really, getting the roads to where those types of random failures should be reduced by a repaving plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and in this slide, I was just showing you how, we would deal with, there are a few districts with smaller road area in them. Again, after I go back to the upper part of the ordinance, I may find some difference in how that's treated, but that, is $100,000 even for District 6 and, year 23, year 29, and just saying that won't be exactly that. We'll actually be looking at the specific roads, the specific road lengths, and putting a cost to those. And so these will be managed such, though, that we have a cap and we have to maintain that kind of distribution, at least in time, so it can't be every year you're doing this, because it wouldn't make sense with a lot of the districts to be putting in little tiny projects everywhere. So that is just looking at it on a 10-year basis. Also note the yellow line. So I had the same thing with District 6 come in 23 and 29, and in 29 all I did was some smoothing that we would do, which we didn't do for 23, just to show, when they all add up and we put all 11 districts in here, we're going to try to smooth that out. The line itself is flat, and in reality it's going to need some form of a rise. And if we're starting with, say, if I'm saying I could do this with $4 million in a year now, that's going to be something else in 2029. If we're adding 8 miles of road a year to 600 miles, we're looking at like a 1.3% increase just on road length. And then to verify that, I went back to a CTC report on the transportation system in Richland County. And going back 10 years, there were about 76 less miles of paved road than there are now, averaging out to 7.6 per year. So it all seems to be going as we're seeing with new development. And I don't even know if those account for some of the other paved roads coming in from dirt roads. So that will go up with that, and then we'll also have obvious inflation. And inflation's something that you really need to calculate in. If it's 3%, 5%, there's some unknowns in that, but that line will not be flat in the end. But I was just showing you an example of how we would be distributing projects.
Ms. Maloney,
Let me ask another question.
Mr. Chair,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chair, Mr. Chair, may I
Ms.
be?
Dixon, yes.
Okay, I'm looking at slide 3 step 3, and I was just looking at the bottom, like District 1, 6, 11 total, over the next, few years. I'm not understanding that particular slide. It just doesn't look. Maybe you can help me with that, because it didn't look like there's equality there.
Yes, ma'am. There are going to be, 11 districts on this map, and I showed three districts, the large, medium, and small road length districts in there just for simplicity. But this is just showing, like in an annual budget, kind of the amount that would have to be put aside each year. It will vary year to year depending on what roads in that district come in. Something we didn't mention yet, but like when we do the road rating, if you're going to have some roads that are going to be in the really low rating category that'll come up, and in each district we'll be able to look at what needs to be done with those in that coming 5 years, and then approve for funding each year those roads. So I'm just giving you an idea of the volume we would need to be at to keep up with the number of roads we have, and keep them in a 30-year life cycle.
I'm looking at it, but I'm not really comprehending that too very well.
That's an example.
Like equal distribution to me, but I have to look at it a little more closely. I will. Thank you.
Ms. Dickerson?
Yes.
Ms. Dickerson?
Yes.
John Thompson here. If you go to a previous slide where Director Maloney showed the distribution of funds by district, I think that'll give you a better idea in terms of how you would allocate money based on the amount of mileage per district. And so it's step 2, continue, then you'll see a better breakdown. So that'll give you a clear snapshot of how funds could potentially be distributed by district based, once again, on the mileage for that particular district.
And that's what I'm looking at, step 2?
Yes, ma'am. Step 2, continue. Yes, ma'am.
All right, okay, thank you. That makes that's a little clearer to me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized after you?
My hand
This is Shakith Newton.
Did you want to speak? I know your hand was up for a while.
Yeah, it's been up for a while. Yeah, just a follow up. Thank you. With the comprehensive plan, there will be annual updates based on your on the report that you provided, because things could change within a district in terms of priority. So we would have the opportunity to do an annual update. Is that correct?
Absolutely, ma'am. I mean, the one thing that will stay is like the numbers we get for the existing conditions, but what we do with that, is looking for a council approval every year. And we stress that every year versus like, randomly throughout the years, so that we kind of go in knowing what funding we're seeking from CTC and others. And having that as something where we, have a little workup to a point where, yep, this is the approved 2021 or 22 road projects that we're going after just the year ahead.
Okay, good.
And will really help out with funding sources.
Great. I don't know whether this is the appropriate time to bring in the abandoned roads and subdivision. Have we discussed that, or should I wait until later?
Anytime you want. I think we'd probably want to go back to maybe the slide with the county picture.
I just have one question regarding it. The roads that have been identified, did we do a survey of all of the subdivisions with abandoned roads so that they would be included, or is just the ones that the people called in about?
No, yes, ma'am, our planning department, I think back in 2015, 2014, they did a subdivision assessment where they looked at all the roads in the county, and these are the ones that were considered abandoned at that time.
In subdivisions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, these were all roads that were part of a plat and final plat anticipated to come into the county system, but didn't in the end due to a default in the development.
I guess what I'm trying to find out, there are subdivisions that have abandoned roads. Is this a inclusive plan of all those subdivisions, or is just the ones that were identified in 2014 that people called in or recommendations were made?
No, it was actually not just call-in. They actually looked at every subdivision when Tracy Hegler was here and Will Simon. There's a big report they did on all of the subdivision roads, pretty detailed, actually. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay, so the ones that we're looking at now are all the roads, or those were the ones that were prioritized and whenever that was done?
Yes, ma'am.
They were they're not all of them, because I can't believe that the numbers we have are all of the subdivisions. I mean, it's hard to accept that.
Yeah, these are the ones that were never turned over to the county.
So
subdivision roads.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
So there are not any other roads, subdivision roads that have been abandoned that were not turned over to the county. It's just these.
No, ma'am, not that I know of.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Newton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Maloney, this follows in a slightly different direction. Ms. McBride's question about the developer abandoned roads. So just so that I understand this process, right now our process is if someone complains, then we fix it if we can, unless they fall under this list of a few roads that we regularly monitor. So my question to you is, hypothetically, we follow this plan as you've outlined, and your step is you bring in the developer abandoned roads first. The way that I'm understanding your process about complaints and the fact that you've had complaints about all these roads is that when these roads then come into the system, following our current process, work would begin on these roads immediately. Is that correct?
Once they're in and the plat has been, or the right-of-way has been recorded, it can be worked on at that time. But what may be out there, if there is a lift of asphalt or something missing, which in some, I hear that's the case, we are not attacking that until, we're looking at the comprehensive plan as far as what are we doing in all the roads. But we will, like you say, yes, if there's a call-in or past call-ins on that, once it's in, we'll fix potholes. But what I asked my staff after, thinking about that, do we have any backlog of that? We certainly don't. We have 2 crews just working on that item, and I don't believe they've ever had a backlog. When they're not busy, they're doing other things. If there is anyone out there that's living with a growing pothole, I'm just saying, call us up, we'll get it fixed, because there's plenty of capacity. What we are having is some people wait on those things, and we have large patches that are required, and more pavement damage. So yeah, we're anticipating some of that, but we don't see it stopping what we're doing with all the roads and the road crews that are working outside of the pavement world in the unpaved roads are dedicated to that, and they will not be brought in to deal with these abandoned roads coming in.
Miss-
Does that answer your question?
If Ms. Newton is through, may I ask a question?
Yes, I'm trying to see if I had it. I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson, then you. Unless
All
Mr.
right,
Jackson.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Stephen, let me ask a follow-up to the question Ms. Newton asked as it relates to abandoned roads. Are you, Mr. Mahoney, because I think I remember hearing you saying before another time, maybe today, but another time, that in order to do anything once they're brought in, one of the first things you have to do is acquire the right-of-way. And how long did you say, approximately, part A of my question, part B will come after, how long did you say it would take approximately to acquire your right-of-way on average?
Yeah, the second to the last slide is our schedule, and at the very top, it shows that we, as pointed out, bringing in abandoned roads was step one, but the main reason is it's going to continue for some time. The schedule is only a year schedule and ends in February. We anticipate to get as many as a couple of these roadway systems in a month, but
Yeah, and we, at one point when we did the subdivision list of these abandoned roads, we had them broken down into the ability to acquire the right of way, and medium and then hard. So the ones that are going to be, there's developers around, we can get to them and pretty sure they'll sign off on it and give us the right of way. But then there's going to be others where somebody bought the road at a tax sale and they live in Minnesota and they're not willing to give us the right of way because they want their money back for the taxes they paid. So how we address that could draw out the process some. But
you've answered the first part of my question. I just want to sort of know from a policy perspective, which ties into the second question, and that is once that process begins and you're working on acquiring those right of ways, you will be continuing to do what? What other things will be going on simultaneously while you're working to pull in these abandoned roads and accomplish the right of way acquisition?
Yeah, we definitely would want to go to the schedule slide, which is the second to the last, and that shows essentially what's going on in parallel. And so the schedule, we're starting in May, for instance, obtain the right of way, and that'll continue on. It fills the year, but it will continue on. The two plan elements starting also in May. That's where we're going to be putting out the RFP and identifying what we want to have in the comprehensive plan and what we need from a consultant who's going to be doing the road rating. And then in June, hire somebody to do the road rating. They have 4 months in here to do that, which I think is really going to take all that, because I've done this myself personally, and thinking of 600 miles by machine, it's going to take that. When that's coming in, we're going to finalize the plan elements and put together a capital plan, and then come to you with the capital plan. We probably will have to work in a working session with the unpaved roads and how we would put that into the plan, and then continue on from that point. And I would imagine that would be something we do in June or July, whenever you guys would be ready, and we'll have to put together a good plan for how would we fund that.
So the plan that you would present to us 5 or 6 months from now would really be the plan that you would then hope for an approval of, that would allow you to go full steam ahead with regards to your approach to considering and working on all of the paved and unpaved roads. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think Ms. Dickinson, next.
Yes, I just really want to follow up on that Brad's question, and that is when she mentioned all subdivisions, and I have to have to go along with her, because when we talk about all subdivisions, I mean, would you be talking like Long Creek, Windermere, you all considered all of those subdivisions, older subdivisions like Elmer Board, Bonnie Forest and all those? So did you all consider all of those?
Ma'am, the mileage and what's in here really wasn't by subdivision per se. It was all the unincorporated roads in the county. And then, and that's where we came up with the mileage that we have of both paved and unpaved roads. Does that answer your question, ma'am, or were
That's
you
a
asking
concern of
about?
mine because I'm trying to figure out how do you define all subdivisions, the roads in all subdivisions? That
Abandoned roads.
and abandoned roads in all subdivisions. Because I'm sure that some of the older subdivisions would probably not be inclusive. Is that correct?
No, in our GIS, we have all the county maintained roads and the abandoned roads identified. So it is a complete listing of all roads within the county that we have them broken out by DOT, what's SCDOTs, what's City of Columbia's, and what's Richland County's.
Are they broken out by subdivision?
I don't think so.
I don't think we have. I think we could identify them that way. The GIS information does include the subdivision, so we could do that. I believe when our GIS manager actually provided that map that shows what subdivisions the abandoned roads are in, there's 18 different ones there. Those were because there are identifiers showing the subdivision name.
Yeah. Mr. Chair,
I'd like to see those subdivisions. I really would. I'd love to see a list of those subdivisions.
Yes, ma'am.
A list of all subdivisions? Or just, was that an abandonment issue?
Because I think Ms. McBride's question was all subdivisions, and you said, and we want to know whether or not these are the new ones that I want to know whether these were the new ones that just came in, or were all of these subdivisions all across Richland County included in this particular, the roads were in all the roads in all of these subdivisions. So I'd like to know what subdivisions that you are actually looking at, because I can't believe the mileage of the roads that you give for all subdivisions are correct. I'd like to see the subdivisions you talked about.
Yes, we'll put together a list that includes, so for all of Richland County roads, all of Richland County subdivisions that they're in. And then, but that's a good point, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me. With a follow-up question regarding the listening.
Go ahead.
Will that identify whether they have been abandoned or not? Because that's my concern.
Yes, and the list we have on our map of the presentation shows the 18 different subdivisions that have those. What we're going to include in addition to that for you is a listing of all the subdivisions in the county with county roads.
Thank you.
Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you. First, I just want to make sure I heard, Mr. Maloney, your answer to our colleague, Mr. Jackson's question. So in terms of looking at your timeline, I'm looking at your schedule. You have here rating the roads starting in June, concluding in September. And then I think you mentioned possibly having a work session looking at dirt roads. I think you said June or July. So just to be clear so that I heard you correctly, according to that timeline, both dirt roads and paved roads would then be part of the comprehensive plan that you are then developing the capital plan for in step 3. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do you have concerns? And I do, too. Do you have concerns that we would be starting the road rating before we've had a working session?
I hadn't thought through that part yet, Mr. Maloney. I just wanted to make sure that I heard you, because sometimes it sounded like we'll make the plan for for paved roads, and then we'll see if we have a chance to figure out dirt roads later. But then the way that I heard you answer Mr. Jackson's question did not sound that way. So I just wanted to make sure that that was part of the plan. So that was one question. And then I have a really silly question for you. So right now, what you're proposing is that we obtain the right of way for these developer abandoned roads starting in May. We start rating the roads in June, understanding that it can take time to acquire the right of way. So I guess my question is, could we not, or could we also rate the roads even before we've obtained the right of way? Because I guess to me, it seems like you're going to have to. If you're not going to have the right of way for all the roads, then you're going to be assessing roads that you don't have the right of way for yet. So I guess I just wanted to confirm that fact. And I've rambled a bit. Do you need me to restate my question, Mr. Maloney?
No, ma'am, I think I understand it. And we can go in, and I think someone pointed this out in the council meeting that, you could go in and inspect, and we already have inspected these. We would carry out the road rating before they come in.
Okay.
But my concern in the process and putting it up front was getting back to the end when we get into, really getting into looking at the comprehensive plan and what we're going to proceed with, and these kind of sitting out there as, you can't do anything with them yet, for quite a while. And that may come up with some of them anyhow.
Right,
so
and I guess I apologize. I guess I was just asking because from a timing perspective, if I'm hearing you correctly, quite frankly, that happens either way. You're not going to get the right of way for every road in 3 months. And so, but you're going to do the assessment anyway. So that, to me, that just affects the steps that you do these in, that there might be alternate ways to do it, because I feel, speaking for myself, I have a commitment to bringing these roads into the system. I just have some questions about when and how. So I think you have answered that question. And I guess just finally, to confirm again, throughout this whole entire process, until we have this comprehensive plan that comes, it looks like in 2021, your department will continue providing maintenance per request, but not in any manner that's more proactive than that. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. I think it'll be as it has been. Certainly anything we come across with the other items, and I think that's out a little farther, Stephen, with the preventative maintenance. That was one thing that Public Works staff had been looking into since last year, getting started with pavement preservation. And I know that it was 2021 that they could start on it. The problem would be is we need the roads rated, so it could happen as early as this fall. But yes, as far as the call-ins and how we're dealing with that, I think they're doing a good job with it. Frankly, they're solving about 10 to 20 times the issues that the service request would reflect as far as the continual inspection they're doing. But there is no, like I said, currently we do not have a system to go out and drive the 600 miles paved. And the dirt roads, we do have a system for known problems to go out and do road scrapes, and about 2 times a year. But we will continue to have those call-in service requests as needed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I have one quick question. Tell me a little bit about what happens with when the city of Columbia, they zone different areas. They automatically just take up those roads. Do we stop maintenance? We keep maintenance, and what happens?
Mr. Chair, could you repeat your question? Your audio broke up and I couldn't hear it. I apologize.
question was regarding when another municipality zone certain areas of roads, do we immediately stop, scraping, paving, whatever we're doing on those roads, and do that municipality automatically takes over? How do we keep up?
So you're saying if, say, the city of Columbia were to annex a big piece of property and it had county roads? Yeah,
Yes.
we, and I think there was we received an attorney general's opinion that said that we cease maintaining it once it's in another municipality.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because that
The exception,
sometimes in the past.
Yes.
the exception would be in some of the towns, so that we have maintenance.
Yeah, we have an
IGA.
intergovernmental agreement with, like Forest Acres or Arcadia Lakes, Eastover, Blythewood to do minor maintenance on their roads and drainage. No capital projects, no resurfacing or anything like that, but small maintenance we can do with our own forces.
Mr. Livingston? Mr. Livingston?
Yes.
This is Larry Smith. Stephen is correct. There is an attorney general's opinion that talks about the fact that when municipalities annex any portion of the unincorporated area, that for maintenance purposes, it becomes theirs. And that includes the roads and all the infrastructure. But if you would indulge me, I do have a question that I'd like to ask Mr. Maloney about the process. I think Mr. Jackson asked him about the time frame for the process of acquiring right-of-ways and those kinds of things. And the question that I would have is that there's a portion of our ordinance that talks about the fact that the road must meet county standards before we take it into the system. Is that correct? For maintenance purposes? Mr. Maloney?
Sir?
Yeah, I think that there's a...
Yeah, that's, Mr. Smith, this is Stephen Staley here. Part of on new subdivisions, there's a process to go through where we're inspecting the subdivision as it goes along in different stages to ensure that it meets the county standard. And then once it gets to that point, we take it over because it meets the county standards. These here, these abandoned roads that we're talking about, we would be taking them over as is.
Okay, that's what I'm getting to. My point is, your ordinance says that the only way you can bring it in is if it meets county standards, right?
Well, the change to that we were going to, the changes that is we are going to be meeting with the former developers where possible, and that is looking for funding from the past mistake. The road will ultimately meet county standard, and what we're looking at is how to make the road safe. And so when it comes in immediately, we can't have major potholes, and that's why I said we have to get through and make those maintenance items, and we will do that amongst all our other maintenance items countywide.
Okay. Well.
Go ahead.
Well, maybe what we may need to do, Mr. Maloney, is, and I know that you had indicated earlier in your presentation that you needed to get with the county attorney's office on a couple of issues, but maybe that would be one of them as well, just to make sure that whatever we're doing operationally is consistent with the ordinance.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, we'd love to have a sit down on that and talk about the process with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gracio,
Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Ms. Myers. I'm sorry, if Ms. Rachel has her hand up, I'll yield.
No, Doug, you have a question of Mr. Smith. Go ahead, relate to what he's talking about.
Yes, sir. So,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Smith, what I guess you'll get with the other half of the staff to discuss this, but also I would ask if you all would look at the section that has been highlighted as essentially driving this whole discussion, because it has essentially left out half the ordinance, because it starts at 20 and we started our instructions at 21B, to actually analyze whether or not the process that we're putting in place is consistent with the ordinance at all. I just ask that you look at that and provide some guidance to me at least, to them. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Racio?
Sure. This first was presented to me at our council retreat back in January 2019. So I'm trying to remember exactly how this was presented then. It's my recollection, though, that when we're talking about bringing the roads into a condition that we can bring them into the county, what I remember being told was that these were abandoned roads because we were considering these roads because we could not get in touch with the developers, that they were non-responsive, or didn't exist anymore, or couldn't be found. So I'm unsure how we're going to reach out to these developers if in fact we have already tried to do so and we've not been able to get anything from them.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. I don't know that when this list was put together that they actually made a valiant effort to get in touch with these developers, other than just knowing that the project went bankrupt and maybe calling them a couple times. This is way before I was here. I'm just assuming this is probably what happened. But they've got on each subdivision road, there's a comment on the subdivision assessment that tells about the developer, whether they're out of business, whether they're passed away, whether they're still doing business in Richland County, but under a different LLC. So each road's got like a different story, so to speak. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Sort of. I feel like what I'm hearing is that the developers were not aggressively pursued, and we now will more aggressively pursue them. Your response also just leads me to want to say something about, if these are folks who are operating under a different LLC in the county, and I think my colleagues have brought this up before, is that we would want to ensure that, we were having those conversations with them as they sought to do business in Richland County. So they shouldn't just be able to change their name, leave a road abandoned, and then go on and build some other subdivisions and then abandon them too, and then change their names.
Yes, ma'am. One thing we have done since all this came about, probably in the late 2000s, our bonding process has been made a lot more robust, and we have a separate bond administrator now that works in our new development department. And so the bonds will not expire. We have a process where 6 months, 9 months, getting closer to expiring, and we send letters and let the bank know that, so we've tightened up on that a whole lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Staff, any other conclusions? Anything else?
Mr. Smith, this is the administrator. May I ask a question, please, sir?
Yes, please.
I'm just trying to reconcile my memory. If someone could please provide this answer for me. Has Richland County taken in previously roads that were not up to county standards at any time in the past? I heard Mr. Smith mention that the county has an ordinance where that's not allowable. I'm just trying to understand. I thought I recall council taking some action, so I'm a little confused.
Yeah, Mr. Brown, this is Stephen Staley again. There was, I think back in 2013, there was a list of 40 roads that were taken over as is, kind of the same situation these are. Of course, I wasn't here and I don't know all the ramifications or the details on it, but we got most all of them in the system now. There's only a few that are still hanging out there.
So in regard to Mr. Brown's question, this situation has come up, Mr. Brown, on multiple occasions. Our advice to the council and the department has been the same, it's been consistent in terms of whether or not those actions are consistent with the ordinance or not. So it's a discussion that if the county is going to move forward in this manner, then I think we need to take a look at the ordinance to determine whether or not something needs to be changed in the ordinance to make what we're doing operationally consistent with the ordinance.
Okay, and in that situation, that would be more of a policy issue than a legal issue?
Yeah, it would be more of a policy issue in terms of what a policy and an operational issue in terms of what the department wants to do, how the department wants to do it. And then if they come to us and tell us this is the way we'd like to do it, then obviously to the extent that the ordinance needs to be amended, the ordinance will be amended.
Okay, thank you, that helps.
Can I ask a question just for clarity?
Who was first there?
I'll yield to Ms.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify what Mr. Smith was just saying, or maybe someone else can. Looking at that case in 20 whatever year you said where this was done previously, were there different circumstances? Was there something that made that case unique, or was it just, nope, we just want to bring them in the system because they live in unincorporated Richland County and we should?
Ms. Newton, if that question is for me, I don't know that there was anything unique about those situations. I think that the information was brought to the council by administration at that time, and but I don't know that there was anything unique about those situations then. Versus now. Of course, I don't know exactly what's going on now at this point, but I think they've all basically been the same. As Stephen alluded to, there were instances where the bonds lapsed that were placed on these projects for surety to make sure that the developer was able to carry out the project the way that it was supposed to be done.
Well, that'll be a part of the research the county would do.
Thank you.
Ms. Myers?
Yes, sir. Just in harmony with what Ms. Dickerson and Ms. McBride were saying, and also just to clarify one thing. So there are at least 3 subdivisions in the district that I represent. One out in Peach Grove, one part of Wood Creek Farms, part of Wildwood. Some of it may be in incorporated Columbia, so it may not count. But at least 3 of them that I know are not on this list, and they've asked some of them to be on this list, and 2 in unincorporated Richland County in the southeast, not the northeast areas where I represent, and they're not on this list. But the one reason that I'm not advocating against or for the list at any point is because we all have constituents who will be benefited and burdened from what we're doing alike. But what I am very, very concerned about is that this is now the 3rd work session that we've had that's been billed as a comprehensive discussion of these roads. And yet again, we have widowed the discussion of dirt roads and said, oh, we'll get to that in a separate work session. I just want to point out that those people also are contributing to the tax money that we're now discussing. And I represent people who have roads and subdivisions that have been abandoned, roads that are well maintained by the county, dirt roads that they can't get out of when it rains, all different kinds of roads. And all those roads, if they're under Richland County's auspices, ought to be discussed in a one-stop comprehensive plan. I am deeply troubled that we are now looking at how we take over roads yet again that aren't in our road system without a discussion of the roads that we have primary responsibility for, in fact, only responsibility for. So I would just say to the Public Works Department, I understand that some of this is easier to figure out than other parts of it. I get that. And I understand that some of it seems like low-hanging fruit and it is a quick win. But when you're talking about the taxpayers who've been sitting around waiting for an answer to some of these questions for many, 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 many years, it just smacks them as us making a decision to go against the ordinance's instructions and do what it is that we want to do rather than what we're supposed to do. And I would just ask that we please get a comprehensive roads program before this body. Thank you.
Any other comments? Anything else from staff?
Mr. Chair.
No, we have that next slide.
I was wondering if this is a time-sensitive issue in terms of receiving the CTC funds.
Well, the CTC funds are, first come, first serve. And so the sooner we get there, the better chance we are of getting the most money we can. Because you'll have the City of Columbia there, you'll have DOT there, and they'll be requesting, big projects as well. So I don't know if it's 100% time sensitive, but the sooner the better.
Is the period open now for applying for the funds?
Yeah, we can apply all the time. And just they're not meeting right now. They didn't meet in February or April. So it'll probably be June, hopefully, before they have their next meeting.
Thank you.
The last slide we had was on the current funding and capital project requests, and that was for 20 and 21. If you could just update on that those are approved for roads for 1.3 million and 952.
Okay, yeah, those are the ones that we've already been approved for
Right.
by CTC.
So that's approved by CTC and council, and we'll be proceeding with those road projects. So we'll continue to look at safety issues. One thing that's remained quiet in all this has been sidewalks and sidewalk requests. Just pointing out that those also come from these same two funds that we have. And so everything's kind of pulling at the same string there. They have about $5 million coming in a year. And the one thing we do have some control over is with the sales tax from vehicle registration or vehicle registration tax coming in. That is kind of in pretty much funding the entire road staffing, equipment, and some capital funds. So whatever we can do to get some funds for that, we will. We will come back to you with a working session on the unpaved roads, dirt roads, and what we can do with that. We do see what has been done with that with the penny tax and what they will get done. And we'll let you know how we can best rate those with you annually to figure out how to bring some of those in the budget we have. So that's all we have for a presentation. If you have any further questions, we're still here.
Are there any further questions? If not, then let me thank my colleagues and staff for taking time out for this very important work session. And I look forward to seeing y'all on tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Meeting's
you.
adjourned.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.